Hello everyone, my name is Arindam. This program is a part of Prerana Readiness for Employment program, in short, PREPS. Today, we are going to learn and take on the 11th chapter of Vikasa Life Skill Manual, which deals with assertive communication. A few instructions before we start. There will be few slides where you will be asked to pause, to go through the slide, understand, and then move to the next slide. You can watch the presentation as many number of times as you want. At the end of the presentation, there will be an assignment which you need to complete, which will help you in understanding that you have comprehensively understood the lesson. So let us start. Here is a picture of two people trying to speak to each other. Is it communication? No, because while the person wants to speak, the other person is not ready to listen. This is not communication. No, why there is a necessity of communication at all? Human beings are social animals. They need to interact with their fellow beings, the systems in the environment, the situations around them. This social interaction is broadly called as communication. What is the general definition of communication? Communication is actually a process of exchanging information, ideas, thoughts, feelings, emotions through speech, signals, in writing, or behavior. Now, let us pause for a while here and think, is communication inborn or God gifted? Are people born orators? No, it is a myth. Communication is an art. It can be developed to a considerable level by some effort, some planning, and some persuasion. That is the reason why communication is called a skill. You must remember, in today's competitive world, good and effective communication will always have a cutting edge. Now, what are the basic elements of communication as a skill? The basic elements of communication generally are five W's. That is the first alphabet of who, whom, what, when, and why, and one H. Let us first deal with the W's. Who? Who is the most important? The person who is communicating. Second is whom? That is the receiver of the message. What is he communicating? Whatever he is communicating has to be clear, precise, and brief. So you need to plan your statement properly. When? The right place and the right thing. And why? why you want to communicate. You may be passing instructions or trying to share or express your views, your sense of sorrows, feelings, happiness, or empathy or sympathy. So, coming to the only one edge, that is where the skill is required. How to communicate. The basic conventional elements are you need to be pleasant and have an open mind while you communicate. You need not be affected by the person, the receiver, his personality. You should avoid being prejudiced or biased against the person who is receiving the communication. You must believe what you wish to say. And lastly, you need to be objective and honest. Now, we earlier in the definition, we understood that communication is a process. How? This is what is described here. To complete a communication, you need to have a sender who needs to encode. Encode means he converts his own thoughts into words and then chooses the channels of communication. It goes to the receiver. What does the receiver does do? The receiver decodes the message into his thoughts and then gives the feedback. So this is basically a flow chart of the process of communication which takes place between the sender and the receiver. Feedback is the most important element in the process for communication. And the picture shows the same process where there is a speaker who uses the verbal channel of communication, where there are receivers who are listening to what he is speaking, gives a feedback to the person who is speaking, whether what has been intended to speak has been understood exactly the way the person wanted them to listen, is basically a flowchart or a process of the information between the source and the receiver. Now, I understood the process of communication. We need to understand what could be the styles of communication. More or less, the styles of communication depends on the personality of the communicator, based conventionally based on the personalities. They have been divided into four styles. The first style of communication is a passive communication. When we say passive communication, we visualize a passive communicator often speaks softly, hesitantly, sometimes uses fillers, often avoids eye contact, allows others to take their personal space. That is more or less a definition or a picturization of a passive communicator. If that being passive, then what is an aggressive communicator? An aggressive communicator normally uses fear or intimidation towards others, gets into the other's space, raise voice when he or she tends to lose control, and generally complaining or accusatory in nature. Then the third is passive aggressive communication or communicator. These guys are indirect in their approach. They use sometimes being passive, sometimes being aggressive, and thus can be procrastinating in their nature of communication. And the last one, the fourth one, is an assertive communicator. A picturization of an assertive communicator is that he or she speaks calmly, softly, confidently, in control of things, maintains eye contact, maintains an assertive good posture, uses patience without being impulsive. Now, having understood all the four types and the styles of communication, let us do an exercise to identify the styles based on the sentences present here. You can pause this video here, try to analyze, identify the kind of sentences, whether they're passive, aggressive, passive aggressive, or assertive. Answer this question and then move on to the next slide. There is also a visual picture where there are four pictures of four different people. Based on the kind of faces they are making, you need to identify whether they are passive, aggressive, passive aggressive, or assertive in their nature of communication. You can pause this video here, think over the answers, answer them, and move ahead to the next slide. Now, let us get into the crux of the matter. What is an assertive communication? Assertive communication is nothing but an effective communication, a communication which is effective. And being assertive in communication includes respect for the person who is speaking as well as the person who is listening. Second is honesty in expressing the thoughts, beliefs, and feelings and the instructions, whatever you are trying to communicate. And being effective in influencing as well as listening and negotiating the purpose for which the communication has been made. This, in sum total, is the crux of assertive communication. Now, assertive communications have lots of facets. So, when you honestly express your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, they turn into assertive communication. Your ability to say yes or no turns the conversation or the communication into assertive communication. You're being able to take your own decision, you're being able to respect yourself as well as the people to whom you're communicating turns a communication into an assertive communication. You're feeling as being in control of your life and your liking for your own self image convert a communication into an assertive communication. Your personal feeling of being confident, your degree of self esteem, your comfort of being yourself, your being ability to express your own self, and your approach to stand for yourself, and ability to influence through listening and negotiation are all very important facets of converting a communication into an assertive communication. Now, there are some rights for a communicator for being called an assertive communicator. The important rights are the right to say no when he or she wants to say no, right not to understand, right to make mistakes, right to be listened to, right to contribute to the discussions, right of dignity above all, right of consideration to others as well as from others, and finally, taking responsibility for the actions of the communication which is intended to be communicated. Now, what are the strategies for developing assertive communication? The strategies are: you will expect resistance from others. You need to practice what you intend to communicate and be patient. You must watch the following: your body posture, your maintaining eye contact, your positive, assertive body language, your gestures, the timing of your communication, and the objective content of your communication are things you need to watch as a strategy. You must think before you speak out, and always remember it is always okay to say no. These are the strategies for developing an assertive communication. Now let's understand there is a concept of I message. I message is where you can express what you intend to express using when, then, what you feel, and what you would prefer. So there are mainly four elements. When stands for the other person's behavior, then stands for the effect of that behavior on you, and the feeling stands for your expressions of feelings, and I would prefer stands for describing the behavior you would like to get from the communicator. So, as for understanding the basic of an I format, let us actually give an example of I format. Here is an example of a poor communication. I already told you I cannot help you tonight. Leave me alone. You need to actually define what style of communication is this. Now, when I convert it into the same communication using I format, I convert it like this: when you asked for help tonight, then I was busy and felt preoccupied. I would prefer you call me tomorrow during the day. Now, a bad communication has been converted into an effective communication. You need to find out these two communications. What are the styles of communication? You can pause this video here, think over the question, answer, and then continue. Now, let us find out the assertiveness elements further. There is an assertiveness ladder where the L stands as look for your right, what you want and need, and define it when you communicate to the receivers. A stands for arrange the time and place to discuss the subject which you need to communicate. D stands for defining the subject or the problem for the other person without taking into account any assumptions or presumptions. The other D of the ladder stands for describe and express the feeling using the I format which we learned in the previous slide. The E stands for express specifically what you want to convey with clarity, brevity, and confidence. And lastly, the R of the ladder stands for reinforcing the idea so that the receiver feels it is good for him as well as for the sender. Now let us learn assertive Techniques. There are mainly six assertive techniques. First is the behavior rehearsals. It's very conventional technique where before you communicate actuals, you practice how you look around and sound through mirror imaging. The second assertive technique is repeating the statement what you intend to communicate. Repeating the message, you must understand, helps in staying focused on the actual issue and avoids manipulative verbal traps. The third is fogging. Fogging as an assertive technique is resorted to when you find that there is an aggressive communicator trying to argue, to placate the aggression without counter argument or without agreeing to what the other person is telling. You use certain words and sentences which can actually placate the element of aggression from the person who is communicating. That is called fogging. Negative inquiry. Negative inquiry is a technique which is resorted to when you seek self criticism in order to encourage honest comments from the receivers, thereby opening the communication, listening to them gradually, and then clearing them. Then there is a technique called negative assertion. Negative assertion is a technique where you feel comfortable with your negatives without feeling of shame or being apologetic. And last is the workable compromise. Workable compromise is a technique where you're able to bargain what you intend to bargain through the communication without compromising your own self respect. What are the advantages of being an assertive communicator? An assertive communicator always will feel good about his own self and about others. It definitely encourages mutual respect, improves self esteem, helps in achieving goals, reduces anxiety for not being able to express oneself, protects her from being taken advantage by others, and last but not the least, it enables us to take decisions which we always wanted to take. Now, if that be so, what prevents us from being an assertive communicator? There are four elements. The first and the most important element is the fear of change. You think if you assert and there is a change, you will not be able to handle it. The fear of change is a big barrier in being an assertive communicator. Then, second is the refusal to admit your own submissiveness. Then, the fear of ruining relationships. When we speak our mind out, we are afraid we will lose people and friends. And last but not the least is your lack of self esteem and self confidence. So, what actually makes us finally an assertive person or an assertive communicator? Remember, there are only three C's. If you can always remember these, there is your confidence. Your confidence in being able to handle the situation at hand. The message you want to communicate is clear and easy to understand for others, and your delivery of the message is in calm, polite, and controlled manner. That will make you an assertive communicator. I have finished. Good luck to you.